Okay, we're live. Hi everyone, thanks for
Hi
joining. We'll
everyone.
just wait for a little bit before we start.
Hello, John.
Hi, Roger.
Good to see you. I'm honoured.
Well,
Hello,
you know,
Lee.
that's a bit of flattery, Roger, but I'll take it.
Hi, John.
Hi, guys.
You would never know it, but John Murray did most of the sports rights media deals in Scotland for the best part of 3 decades.
Okay. Thank you for being with us.
That's probably a bit of hyperbole. It was only 29 years, yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
I think we have our next guest already then, Roger. We have the next conference planned already then.
I just wish that the people in Scotland had listened to Roger when he was here with his ideas and concepts that he had. And if they'd listened to him, particularly Celtic and Rangers, the current revenue for Scottish football would be about 3 times what it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that, surely.
Yeah, well, shout out to Keith Wyness, who is one of those people who was there at the time. Keith's on. CEO of Aberdeen at the time.
Yep.
Roger, while we're waiting, so a few fun questions. What team do you support then? Is it Celtic, Rangers, or Como, or someone else? Celtic, yeah. I'm partial to them as well in Scotland.
Oh, really? Excellent.
Yeah, because of the the colonial link. I think maybe it's the Irish Indian sort of solidarity. But no, I really like them. I hope they find their way again after with what's he called, Fotheringham, and then Martin O'Neill, is it current manager?
Yeah, he's there just now.
Yeah, just now. And you wanna start, guys? We have 22 people in already. 20.
Yeah, let's wait a couple of minutes and then we'll start.
Perfect. And you're big on cricket as well, no, Roger?
Say that again.
You're big on cricket as well, no?
I love cricket. Recently, I'd have to say that it's not my top thing, but when I was growing up, it certainly was. But beyond knowing a little bit about the 100 and all the various rights holders, I can't say I'm an expert on cricket. Rugby's a bit of a thing these days.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say too much about that one.
Hey, Roger, while we're on, what about David Cogan's controversial appointment?
He was in trouble yesterday for the scandal that came out with the payments to the Labour Party that obviously appointed him as their regulator.
Yeah, that's been bubbling for the past week. Yeah,
that's not a good look, I'm afraid. I like Cogan. For those that don't know, David Cogan was the advisor to my league 25 years ago, and he's a very, very interesting character. More interesting also is that the two people that worked with him, I still work with. One is Dan Burns of Oakvale, and the other one is Mark Watson of The Zone, who before was the CEO of BT Sport. So Real Enterprises that Cogan owned was a little bit of a breeding ground for talent. These are all stories from the start of the bull market, as it were. But yeah, all these people are still around.
And the bull is dead.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into that. You could argue that the valuations of sports franchises, it's not dead. How much did Atletico Madrid go for? 2.5 billion?
Something to that effect, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
No comment, as they say. Well, guys, let's get going.
Let's get going. All right.
To you.
Yeah, I'll just get the intro out of the way quickly. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Looks like we have quite a diverse crowd, and we are honestly honored and grateful for everyone that has decided to join the call. Extremely excited and extremely honored again to have Roger Mitchell with us. Valentino and Roger will do proper introductions for themselves, but honestly, one of the most recognizable and interesting voices on sports media, at least that we've come across. And honestly, the purpose of this event is just going to be to have a frank conversation with Roger about his views on sports, media, all things in between. So yeah, I won't take any more of your time, Valentino. Floor is all yours. Roger, the floor is all yours. And yeah, let's get going.
Thank you, Hanno. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanno. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. Roger, welcome. We're really glad to have you with us to discuss about the sports industry and everything surrounding it. To remind our audience, Roger here is the co-founder and chairman of Albachiara, which is, among other things, a consulting firm in the sports, entertainment, and media industry. Before that, Roger, you've had a long career in the sports sector. You've been the commissioner for the Scottish Premier League, which is the equivalent of the LFP in France, the national league managing the soccer. You've been a member of the UEFA committee. You've worked in music as well at EMI, which is a former Virgin. The list goes on. The list goes on. But you're also hosting annually a sports conference in Como called Sports Summit Como, in which every big player in this game is meeting to talk about the future of the industry. So again, thank you for finding the time to be with us tonight.
My pleasure. It's always great to see the new generation coming up and being interested in the stories from the past. If I can shed some light on that, I will. My co-founder from Albachiara, Rafael, is also on the call, so I'll be on my best behaviour.
That'll be a change, Roger.
So to begin, well, one of the reasons we wanted to organize this conference is because several of us read your book, Sports Perfect Storm, in which you address some concerns about where this industry is heading. And so we'll dive more into the details a little bit after. But first, could you remind us what's the definition of a perfect storm?
A perfect storm is when various difficult weather fronts collide together to make kind of feed on themselves and make an even bigger storm than they would on their own. So the book is about my view of various weather fronts that are going to affect our industry, that are just all going to feed on each other and create very turbulent waters. Okay,
great. So now, regarding the sports industry, to you, what's the first front that is hitting this industry right now? Where would you start? Which is the biggest concern for you?
Well, the way I organized the book and really my own thoughts was putting it into three different categories that are interrelated, but they're different. One is money, one is demographics, and one is geopolitics. I always say follow the money, and if we start there and then we can go on to the other ones, you tell me when to stop or interrupt whenever you want. Otherwise, I'll speak for half an hour here. On money, you know, the business model, the revenue model of sport since the start of the 90s has been media rights. We have sold our IP to broadcasters who have used it through a subscription model to make their own money very successfully, and that has funded the bull market in sport of the last 30 years. So if you want to think of it that way, the broadcast market industry has been our banker. They are the ones that have funded us, have made us able to pay players 100 times what they were getting paid 30 years ago. So you think, what is the health of my banker? And then you say, not very good, because their own business model has changed. Whether it's in America or whether it's in Europe, they are moving from an aggregated subscription model to a disintermediated streaming model. And I always loved, Valentino, this little analogy also with the music business. A sports channel back in the day, in the early 90s, was a little bit like an LP. You might not know what that is, an album, where you had a couple of hit singles and 7 filler songs, and people bought the whole album for the singles in the main, and that's a very high margin business. We used to sell a music album for, call it, €20, and margins were very, very high. Same for a sports channel. They needed to fill it. They needed to have premium rights that attracted the big subscriber numbers, and also sports rights that gave them a full programming schedule. That's a high margin business. Same in America. Let's take ESPN. They did the same thing like that, and then their model was selling that to the cable distributors for carriage fees, and that was a very, very juicy high margin business. And I'm an ex-accountant. I guess I'm still an accountant. When you go from a high margin business like the media sector has been to a very tight one now, streaming is difficult. You in France will see that with the French league now. You have to get involved in marketing, you have to get involved in customer service, you have to get involved in churn management and all these kind of things. In the past, sport had a very simple job. You put a tender out for your rights of a certain amount of live games, and you hope that you got a whole lot of bidders competing with each other to bid up your rights. It was a very, very simple business for us in sport and for the pay TV people, because they had a very juicy model as well. That model has changed. So the first part of the book is, if our banker, the media sector business model has changed, is that going to be good news or bad news for us? And the fact is that it's bad news. You can see the changes in the media sector all over the place now. We could get into all examples of that, whether it's in France and what's happened with Canal Plus and Media Pro, or whether it's BT Sport now part of Warner Brothers Discovery now on the block, whether it's Sky Deutschland being bought by RTL. Before you even get into what I would call the global platforms that are called Amazon, YouTube, Netflix, and Apple TV. So in very, very quick summary on that first bit of the money answer, it's our banker has changed their model, and it's not going to be as rich for most of our industry. The very, very top of our industry, what's called the big eventers, the tentpole, the super premium rights, those are the ones that move subscriptions, big subscriptions. They'll probably do okay and arguably even better. But if you're a medium-sized, second, third tier, fourth tier sports rights holder, I'm afraid you're not going to do very well. I would stop there. That's the first one. That's media sports rights. There's obviously lots of other things on the money side.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. So to you, the business model has changed with the emergence of global streaming platforms such as YouTube, Netflix, Prime. This is where our banker became.
That's one of the reasons. The other one, very simple, is piracy. You know, we're in France, virtually in France. The levels of piracy that DAZN experienced when they owned the rights to Ligue 1 is just eye-watering. You know, and I saw this in the music industry. I saw the complacency that everybody thought it was a small thing, business leakage, something not to worry about. I'm afraid that's not the case. We could talk about that all day, and there's many podcasts that go into very deep detail on piracy. But that's another element that's just killing that old model. The other part of that, which is into the demographics column, as I said, they're all interlinked. Generation of your age has got a far less strong idea that content needs to get paid for. You have grown up in the main with IP, whether it's newspapers, magazines, user-generated content, for being for free. The idea of paying a subscription for Gen Z and Gen Alpha is very difficult. A lot of them just don't have that DNA in them. So if you've got a business model based on somebody putting a direct debit to pay a subscription every month, I would be very worried. And you can see that everywhere. So that would be the other reason why their business model, big media, is not anywhere near as bullish as it was before.
Yeah, but one could say, for example, that some emerging leagues and some that are very popular, like UFC, right, were based on pay-per-view. So how do you analyze that? Why are traditional sports that worked on subscription and pay TV are plateauing or decreasing in attention and interest, and some others are increasing? How do you explain that?
It's a very good question. I think it would be the answer I gave a second ago. Big event, tentpole, Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, Conor McGregor. They are big enough to still have big numbers for pay-per-view. But even on those ones, I'm quite close to the people at DAZN. If you ask them what their estimate was of how much piracy there was on all of those things, it's very big. So if you're big enough that you can afford to lose 50% in piracy and still have a good model, good luck. There ain't many like that. There just aren't. So and then now you see these models change all the time. At UFC, which you're referring to now, the rights have been sold to Paramount, which have paid a lot of money for them. And you could say there's loads of examples of media still paying very well for sport IP. The NBA about 18 months ago, a year ago, did a very good series of deals, fragmented, but the total number was very, very big. And you say, look, nothing's wrong, nothing to worry about. I wrote at the time that I think that those NBA deals will prove to be a Pyrrhic victory. People will regret having done them for some of the reasons we're talking about. And another one. If you think of if you think of what the bidders for sport are interested in now, and the bidders for sport predominantly are the new platforms, predominantly. They don't want season-long, week in and week out sport. They want the playoffs. They want, as you say, the big matchup in combat sports. They want a Grand Prix. They want a golf major. They want a tennis major. The NBA, the MLB, most sports, rugby, Scottish Premier League, they are selling weekly fare when I think they should be moving much more towards a principle of scarcity and working out what are the things that are really moving the needle for potential bidders. If you take Scotland, for example, there is no doubt that it's mainly the 4 Old Firm games and the rest of Celtic and Rangers games. Even in my time, which is now 25 years ago, our TV rights were based around crafting them around Celtic and Rangers, because those were the only things Sky were interested in the main. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit off in focus here, but all of this is so connected. Money, demographics, it's all connected. So what I'm saying about the NBA is that they have got a whole load of regular season games in a world where all that's really going to matter for the bidders of sport are the playoff games, or the games that are on Christmas Day, or the games that are on Black Friday, or the ones that are important to get people onto their platforms at the right time. It's not a regular league game week in, week out. Same for baseball, a huge amount of regular season games where one could argue, who cares? Because the action doesn't really start until you get to the playoffs. Same thing for golf tours. Same thing for tennis tours. People want the majors. And we'll get to a place one day where it's not just they want the majors, they want the Sunday back nine. They're not really bothered about the first 3 days. I know that sounds heresy, but for the new bidders of sport, we are competing with cat videos for audience. They don't care what it is. They just look at the numbers. And I'm afraid that we have set out our stall as an industry to sell a product that is no longer matching the needs of the new bidders. I could go on further on that. Your generation is much more a highlights generation. You will pick up all kinds of updates or clips or memes or watch-alongs or hate watching, all the things that you guys know that my generation in the main don't know. That's what you watch. What we've sold for 30 years is the full 90 minutes or 80 minutes games, thinking the exclusivity of that is where you will make your money. The very latest thinking now, in my world, I see quite a lot, is what they call the inverting of the funnel. You know, in the past, you sold the live games and your highlights packages were kind of like marketing in some way to get people to subscribe to the live game. I think that's going to turn around a little bit, and the smart play is going to be, how do you create highlights packages with all these things I mentioned earlier and monetize them, and the game actually becomes really only for the very super fan. Just turning it around a little bit. The idea of we sold exclusivity of a live game, I believe, is dead.
Okay, but like you said, our generation, especially for highlights, we have always consumed that for free, right? It's on YouTube. Most people today consume highlights instead of going to watching the entire game, especially for football. It's PK who said that his sons don't want to watch 90 minutes of football right now. How can you monetize something that people have been used to get for free?
Well, that's a great question, right? So everybody says, oh, the kids don't want to pay for anything. They've got no attention span. What do they spend? We can't base our industry on this young generation because they don't spend money. Well, that's wrong. They do spend money. It's just on stuff that my generation, doesn't understand. Digital props, virtual goods, things like that. Things that we would find absurd. But you look at the numbers of these things and they're big. So I've had a view for maybe a couple of years now that you will give them the highlights. They will probably be free, but the game will be in trying to monetize around the edges of it and linking to e-commerce. You know, one of the big themes about our sports industry in the main is that we've been B2B, i.e. we've sold our rights to other people who in the main have made a lot of money from that. That's broadcasters. It's also people like Fanatics that are selling merch. Certainly newspapers. You could go all the way down this. We have never been risk-taker entrepreneurs in sport, and other people have made money out of that. I think going forward, our only option is to start doing that and thinking that way. But that takes you, Valentino, into another problem, because the more you say, I'm going to create this beautiful business, this B2C business, it's going to have all these monetization verticals, and your club is going to say to you, your clubs in the league are going to say to you, and what money do I get each year to spend on players? We'll have to wait to the end of the year. No, that's not going to work. I need to have my player budget now. And that's the great dichotomy in sport. You know, every time I say something is negative and it needs to change, I'm very aware how difficult it is to change it. Yeah, but there's some things that are just going to wash over us, these weather fronts, whether we like it or not. One is that the media dollar for almost all sports, apart from the very top, is going to disappear. and we have to find other ways to monetize that. That's why I've spent so much time with YouTube. You know, I've been advising them for a while just to think through how they are omnipresent position with younger generations, and you guys know how much that is. My generation doesn't understand it yet, but YouTube is everything. How you take that model and start making some money off it is got to be our top priority. Thinking that, oh, if we stop that and we stop piracy, we'll get back to the old model, which many in our industry still think. I just think that's delusion. What do you call it? Delulu, you guys?
Yeah.
That would be my answer so far.
And
Keep going.
YouTube seems to be the leader for the next wave in sports distribution. But do you see any good challengers, somebody that stands a chance against them, because they're far ahead in terms of reach, right? They're a global platform. You have YouTube, whether you're in Australia, Europe, America. So among the other global streaming platforms or distributors, do you see anybody that can challenge YouTube? You talked about e-commerce and the integration that you can make. Someone like some player like Amazon or Prime or Netflix that just partnered with the Spotify as well on podcasts.
Yeah.
Do you think they stand a chance?
Well, you know, we can listen to our favorite podcasts about all of this discussion because they're all out there. Whether it's Puck, The Town, you know, and all the other ones. And you know, to answer your first question, who's going to challenge YouTube? Some of the things you hear is that, you know, Netflix will start offering top creators, because that's what YouTube is built on, really, creators. Top creators to come to them. You know, the way that Spotify got Joe Rogan and Bill Simmons and things like that, you know, the currency will now become the creators. So one of the when you're pretty close to the YouTube world, the thing they're really scared about is the Netflixes and the Amazons. You know, when Amazon, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think I am, but when they've done a distribution deal with TF1, which is your terrestrial French broadcaster, that got attention in YouTube. You know, that kind of idea of who's linking up with the terrestrial people gets their attention. You know, okay. I'm just hesitating to see what I can say and what I can't say now. Is all of these old broadcasters, whether they're free to air, BBC, ITV, TF1, whatever, they themselves know they've got a major issue going forward, and they're all trying to do big deals with these kind of platforms, and that's going to be the game. You even talk now in the UK about Sky buying ITV. All of this, for people that are not familiar with the viewing numbers, doesn't make a lot of sense. But the fact is that young kids, you said it yourself, don't watch TV. So you have in some way got to do a smart partnership in the sea of where those fish are swimming, the fish being Gen Z, and that's YouTube, etc., etc. So as you see, all of this is very linked. You know, my second column, which was demographics, that's that part of it. You know, we just have a younger customer base, if I can say that in sport, a younger customer base who doesn't want the product we've been selling for 30 years, ain't going to pay for it, and lives somewhere different from where all our broadcast partners have lived. I think that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah,
myself, I think that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about the changing in viewing habits. You've talked about formats, the NBA and MLB being too long compared to the NFL, for example, who has embraced the principle of scarcity, as you said, for a long time now. And we've talked about how sports now has to, and platforms have to work with content creators. How do you think the future of sports rights owners is to think about how they can blend entertainment and sports more accurately than they did until now. We've talked about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Do you think we're heading about something that is more and more linked to entertainment, just compared to only sports performance?
It's a very good question, and the answer, sadly, is complex. It would be very easy to say, yes, we need to get more into that stuff. But the fact is, the sports fan is not homogeneous. There's not one version of it. There's guys like me that want something. There's people like my son that wants something else. You all want something different. So there's going to be, Lee Radburn's on this call, the personalization of the offering that will almost certainly come through AI and versions of that. That's what I would say. But we've already got evidence of how we've needed to change. If you look at the NFL, the granddaddy of the whole industry, their big success has been on the Manning casts. That is, frankly, that's a watch-along party with the two Manning brothers that makes it the NFL a little less buttoned down. Let's get the jackets off. Let's have a laugh. You've got versions of that all over the place, whether that's Arsenal Fan TV or whether it's Goldbridge. All the idea that you just put on a 90-minute game, you've got your same old commentary, your same old angles. That's just not going to fly. You guys aren't going to accept that. You want to be surprised and in some way engaged. So our challenge, Valentino, is this. How do we change a little bit like that without getting into the circus that was Mike Tyson and Jake Paul? Because there is a big part of sports fans, not just the old guys, a big part that think that's just a bridge too far. So we're in this game of balance, and some of the things in the book talk about this, because there was the same in the music business. It's about balance. We in a record company, a record label, we had certain artists that were what we called the real deal. They were the ones that were credible, authentic, appealed to what I would call the classic music fan. And you know what? Maybe they didn't even sell a lot of money. We had quite a few of them on Virgin. Guys like John Lee Hooker and things like that, they'll sell nothing. The balance is you've also got the Spice Girls, which we had, which made all your numbers, but they didn't make your brand. They were what I always call bubblegum. A couple of albums gone. Well, we made a lot of money on those two albums that allowed us to keep all the Ben Harpers, you name it, Nina Cherries, all these kind of ones over there. So sport, I'm afraid, is going to have to get the way every other industry is, where you slightly change your product for each little segment of your audience, like a car manufacturer does, Mercedes, like Armani does, different versions of Armani. Armani Black Label isn't Emporio. Sport has just said, there you go, knock yourself out. I'll see you in 4 years when we have to sell the rights again. Good luck.
Yeah,
that's just not going to fly anymore. As
you said, the NFL, being the granddaddy that they are in the sports industry, they partnered with YouTube on a specific game, and they did the watch with type of broadcast in which you can watch along your favorite creator and stuff like that. We can go on the media aspect of the business model, but we also wanted to talk about the two other revenue streams in the sports business, which are sponsors and ticketing. Do you see storms coming on these fronts as well?
Sure. I mean, the ticketing one's easy. I'm just trying to get this moving along because I took a lot of time there. Forgive me for that. But no ticketing's easy. Football clubs, rugby clubs, whatever, has been made up mainly of the big popular sports. NFL would be another one, of working class men and women who go along week in, week out with incredible loyalty. They will never change. It is a horrendous idea to price them out the market, because you can sell a ticket to a tourist fan for maybe 60% more. Ticket pricing in our industry, everybody seems to think you can just keep increasing it. You keep increasing it. Again, music industry gives us examples. There was a lot of concerts that were cancelled because the prices were just getting too high. So I think that's another weather storm, that the idea that you can just put up ticket prices and keep the soul, the credibility, and even the numbers, overall numbers, going in the right direction is a mistake. But that's where we are just now. Equally, more and more games going onto the schedule from competing rights holders. You take some, you mentioned cricket before, loads of different rights holders. They all want to maximize their own money. So what do? They put in new events with more games. The World Cup becomes, I don't know what it is now, 48. I have no idea. But you get the schedule of playing a sporting calendar is now horrendous. And even in sports like tennis, you've got athletes keeling over, literally not finishing games. So this idea that you just keep throwing product, and you charge higher prices, for me, that's completely the wrong road. Go on the other road, scarcity, make it affordable, etc. Things like that. Sponsorship. Again, sport and sponsorship has been not remarkable. Let's say not remarkable. What we have done over the years is we've sold logos and billboards, and said, work out your equivalent media value for that. And somebody would have valued that. There's lots of people that do that. They're putting their finger in the air, to be honest, because I don't know how you do that. It's like in digital advertising now. When I'm scrolling past a video, that's counted. Somebody counts that, but I've paid no attention to that video. So equivalent media values, that for a modern sponsor just doesn't work. They have become much more sophisticated. They're not really in the awareness game anymore. I would suggest they're in the game of, how is this incrementing my own business? I always use this lovely example. BMW won't sponsor a football team because a football team isn't close to being able to identify the 5% of its fan base that could even afford a BMW. The sport doesn't know its fans, and it certainly doesn't know rich enough fans. You know, if you were, that's why they've only got betting sponsors. I'm talking about football now. Sometimes I make that mistake, but it is the biggest sport. So football all across Europe has got a horrendous raft of sponsors because they're just rubbish at selling the product. You know, if you're in the real game of modern sponsorship, you would know your fans well enough to know when they were married. Let's say you're Procter and Gamble and you've got Pampers, that kind of product. You're trying to guess, as that business, when certain people are going to get into the baby game, if I can say that without offending anybody these days. Are going to get into the baby game. So you will pay a lot of money for knowing the people on your database that got married within the last 18 months. Sport has got no idea. And you know, the example of that is when Barcelona and Spotify did their thing, and they said, we've got all these hundreds of millions of fans or whatever the number is. And then Spotify went in and they said, well, actually, no, you don't. So that train, I think, is going to hit hard. The idea that sponsors are going to say, unless you can really give me rich segmented data that is useful for me to upsell to your client base with a qualified conversation of introduction, I'm not paying for your equivalent media values. I can buy that audience on YouTube. I don't need you.
Yeah, for sure. Considering what we said, and the fact that in sports, in soccer especially, the costs are extremely high. How do you see the finance part of it, especially if you're a club and you have these costs, these salaries to pay, and they are reluctant to accept the business model transition to YouTube and Netflix?
Players, you mean? The players.
The players. Yeah. Where does the money is going to come from to ease that transition?
It's not going
for
to
example,
come. You're going to have to find players that accept what you can afford.
Yeah, but we talked a little bit before the conference about Apollo investing in Atletico Madrid, and they just created a new fund dedicated to the sports industry. We have CVC, who is also, but in a different kind of fund. How do you see the big finance and how they're going to play out in the sports sector in the future?
Well, that was the last Sunday column of 2 days ago. Which is you're absolutely right, Valentino. We've lived in a world, certainly for 25 years, where there has been an abundance of capital that's looking for a home. And I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, they've started focusing on what they call the asset class of sport. So sport assets, and mainly in America, so far, starting to come over here now, but we can talk about that more in detail. They've gone up because of that. It's just supply and demand. There's more capital chasing a scarce asset. There's only so many Formula One teams, NFL franchises, teams in the EPL, etc., etc., etc. So you have to say, is that wall of money going to continue? If so, the value of sports assets in reality should probably go up, certainly at the very top level, again, polarized between premium and the rest. And that then takes you into the world of macrofinance and geopolitics, which is, again, so do you think governments can continue to print money to create this capital out of thin air, to continue to have huge leverage with debt funds like Ares and Apollo that just gives you so much money to drop $2.5 billion on Atletico Madrid, which on any financial basis of fundamentals cannot be justified, that valuation just cannot be justified. So it's what I call in finance, it's the greater fool theory. I'll buy it today, but in 3 years' time, there's going to be a bigger fool that's got more money that's been printed from somewhere that will buy it for 4. So it's just a game of, am I picking the graph to get in before it breaks and comes down the way? And that's, big finance is a little bit like what I was saying earlier about cat videos. They don't really care what the asset is. It's a brutal industry. They're just saying, is it going up? Is there more and more people looking to get in? Yes, there are. I can see all my competitors bidding for the same assets. There is a huge appetite here. I can get in. Doesn't matter if Atletico Madrid is probably worth 500 million instead of 2.5 billion. Doesn't matter, because I can sell it for 4 in 3 years' time. For that to happen, you need certain macro finance things to stay in place. A low cost of capital, continued pumping of liquidity from central banks and governments. And I don't want to make this a finance podcast. If people are interested, the last column talks about that. But, you're right. There is a thinking that says, forget all this small stuff about sponsorship, ticket prices, YouTube, widgets, personalization. Just look at the flows of money coming into sport. And if you think they're going to continue to go, happy days, forget the rest. But that's the same for any asset class, for classic cars, Picassos, AI stocks, you name it. I'm sorry I can't give a better answer for that. But that is just the reality of our capital markets just now. So that was the second thing in my money side of it. The more micro business model stuff, where all the revenue lines I think are going to come under pressure, and then the more macro side, where I personally think there's a risk that the capital markets have a significant step down. But I've been saying that for a long time, and I've been wrong. So you shouldn't get too pessimistic about that. The other thing about demographics is younger ones watch different things. They want different formats. We've covered that. The other thing is again, big demographics. Europe isn't growing. Birth rates aren't there. Usually, so the general uplift in GDP isn't going to come from a rise in demographics. So capital looks at that and says, well, where have I got a chance that I'm on a rising tide? and you look at the Middle East and you look at Asia, to a lesser extent Africa still, but the center of gravity of the sports industry on this side of the Atlantic has moved to Saudi and the Middle East, and that's a great hub to hit India and Southeast Asia. These things are poorly understood. Europe is quite insular in all this. We invented sport. Sport is our thing. Sport has to be done this way. Meanwhile, over here, there's people looking at hundreds of millions, billions of potential customers with different ideas of where they can make money. That's another complacency thing that I think they're going to get a big wake-up call on.
Well, it's a good transition because we've talked about media, changing viewing habits, now demographics and money, where does it come from? Nobody can if you have eyes and ears, everybody needs to acknowledge the rise of Saudi money in the sports sector, whether it's investing it in America and Europe or for themselves in the Saudi Pro League. How disturbing and how they can challenge the model as we've known it.
Well, you've got all the evidence already. Let's not necessarily Saudi, but let's take the demographic play and come back to cricket again. The cricket that I watched when I was studying at university in the summer was a completely different type of cricket that's on offer just now. T20, the 100, a different format. County cricket's pretty much dead apart from the 100 now. And Test cricket is hanging on by its fingertips. That is the core and the soul of a sport being changed by demographics, in this case India. Cricket is an Indian sport now, and you just need to say certain things like that, and that's fine. But that's what happens when you take your eye off the demographic ball. On Saudi specifically, look how they've changed golf. For right or for wrong, they've changed it because I think what they're going to do is they're going to look at all the horrendous governance of traditional sport, golf, tennis, rugby, ultimately football as well. And I think they've come to the conclusion you'll never get them to change by partnering up with them. The governance is just too entrenched, too polarized, too political. So they'll start all these challenger leagues, and that's a problem, because these challenger leagues, for all the willing, they may even make money, they may be great, they don't have the kudos and the gravitas of the glory of sport, in my view. If you completely cut your link from Tom Morris in golf or Bobby Jones, and you've got a successful live, that I don't think you've made a success. So in reality, you're looking for this evolution in formats and models to be done within the existing structures. The evidence so far is that that's impossible. They stopped the Super League in soccer. My rugby thing just now, we barely started and they're already threatening that the players won't be able to play international rugby. The evidence is all over. So, that's two things that are going to crash into each other. And it could be done differently, but it isn't being done differently. And that takes you into other things which now are way beyond all of this stuff, which is geopolitics. And I remember when I wrote the book, everybody said, what do you mean by that? Do you see Gianni Infantino at the announcement of the Gaza Peace Treaty? You see that and you think sport isn't geopolitics? Him having a World Cup and a Rugby World Cup in America and standing beside Trump deciding who's going to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, whether it's going to be the Paramount friends he's got, Ellison and Dana White of the UFC, Ari Emanuel, or is it going to be the guys he doesn't like at Comcast, Brian Roberts. Comcast, by the way, owns Sky. Whether we like it or not, all of these things now are incredibly dictated by politics and geopolitics. And that takes you into, as I said in the last column, the price of oil. And the price of oil is, by definition, geopolitics. Iran, Russia, natural gas, Qatar. All of these people have got roles in sport, and they're all changing. So these are all the weather fronts are coming all together to an industry that I have to say, and for 30 years has been comfortably asleep at the wheel. And that's not even a criticism, because why would you not be asleep at the wheel where all you had to do was put out a tender for your rights on a B2B model? You took zero risk and said, there they are, I'll receive your auction bid by 3 o'clock on this Friday afternoon, and then you just played one off against the other. This has been an industry it's been as easy as anything for 30 years. Now they're in a different game, and they're just not ready to deal with it, in my opinion.
For sure. If you're okay with it, I'd like to open the Q&A session. I think we're about 30 now. So if anybody has want to ask a question, maybe to avoid to make it as smooth as possible, you raise your hand using the emoticon, and then I'll pass the torch.
I think, Roger, if you can see in the comments, there's already 3 questions. You can start by that if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. It's pretty impressive that I knew where the comments button was. Right. Okay. Ligue 1. Okay, that's the streaming service of French football.
Exactly.
Which, what is the question? Has the performance surprised you, and what do you think other small leagues will do now? Look, in 2002, we in Scotland, and it is a we, it wasn't me, it was we, decided to go down this path not because we wanted to, because we had no option. The media bids had dried up for a different reason. There was a dot-com bust, there was 9/11, there was a media recession. All the people that had been around at the time, the ITV Digitals, the NTLs, they all disappeared. There was one bidder, and Sky didn't give the bid that my clubs wanted, so we looked at this alternative. I think it would have worked. So that's the context of me answering this question. Now, on France, I think I may surprise you when I say I don't think it will work, because the world's changed a little bit. For a lot of the reasons we've said, they're still selling exclusive IP to a live game, where I'm not sure that's the product anymore. There's piracy. We saw how much DAZN suffered, but that's the main thing. There is data points, especially with DAZN, who's got a subscription model, and in theory, that is their core business, a B2C subscription pure play sport streamer. They couldn't make the French League a success, and they weren't even close. Now, you could say the pricing was way too high, and that would be the view of Ben Morel, who was the guy in charge, and all that kind of stuff. And that if you put a lower price, you'll get subscriptions. But I'm afraid at some point, whether it's price or volume, the multiplication of the two needs to make the number. And I think, it's my own experience, and I think it means it's everybody else's experience. I will take up introductory offers for subscriptions, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's the Telegraph, whether it's for your subscription service there, whether it's for the Athletic. See when that period runs out and it goes up, and I see it, I'm out. And that's me. I don't have any worries about being able to afford it or not. And that's me. I'm not going to pay for that. So what we are seeing now in France, I think isn't able to be judged as I'm willing to be proven wrong, and you tell me if you think differently. But I think the DAZN experience of the year before is much more telling than this new thing where they've gone all guns blazing. They've thrown the kitchen sink at this to try and get subscriptions up. And I don't think they'll get there. Fact is, there's just isn't a business anymore in subscription selling of French Ligue 1 football. It's just not big enough. When you take piracy off and everything, it's just not big enough. What the answer to French football is reduce the player salaries. That's your shock absorber. The idea that you'll get revenues back up to where you are is fighting the last war. Address the real problem. You're playing your players too much for what is the sustainable revenue number that should be there in French football. Does that answer the question, or is it deflected?
Lee, you have a follow-up, Lee.
Yeah, no, thanks, mate, and good to see you, Roger.
Good to see you.
I'm as surprised as you that they got that much money. I think that was more the point. I think they've got 158 million euros worth of revenue, 142 million distributed clubs, and I agree that it's not sustainable. But I think there is always going to be a set of die-hard fans who will always pay for something. But I completely agree that you need other monetization options, and it's not sustainable. So I think my concern would be, and I think you know this as well, is that other small leagues will look at this and go, oh, look, they made a load of money, and think that this is a new model that they can just, get a load of money, revenues from it. And it's just falling back into that same cycle again that they're doing previously, because it's, it's a big number and that people are going to be looking at. And that's what I think was more surprising.
You're right, but can you blame them, Lee?
No.
All these non-Premier leagues, what are they going to do? They're panicking. So they're going to take a view, they're going to look at a model, they're going to get optimistic, and then the reality will hit, and who knows how all that winds up. I personally think of European soccer in a different way. I was asked to go on another thing about piracy with the Athletic the other day, and DAZN, whichever way you want to cut it just now, are the kingmakers in European soccer. I think Comcast are retreating. They've sold out of Germany. They don't buy Serie A in Italy already. And who knows? Premiership's different. We know the Premiership's different. So let's leave that aside. Continental Europe, in the main, is going to be financed by DAZN, in the main. Conversely, if DAZN say, you know what, I can't make a business out of this. I tried in France, I can't do it. I'm out. What happens to European football? What happens to European football? You have got an EPL, up in that island in the northwest of Europe, doing okay still. Still got the old model going really, still okay. You've got the traditional countries of Spain, Italy, France, and Germany. Maybe Germany just behind Britain, so not so bad. But the three Mediterranean ones, shambles. And, then you think, well, what do they do? Well, the first thing they do is they get rid of the idea that they've got national leagues. Nobody's interested in a national league. Go through them. Apple, Amazon, Netflix, YouTube, are any of them interested in geo-blocked national rights? No. So why do you keep offering geo-blocked national rights to the only bidder in town? Get your act together. So I think that what's going to happen will ultimately bring about a Super League that may or may not include English football, but I can't see any option for the Italians, the Spanish, the Germans, and the French. So that's where my kind of thinking goes. I don't see that there'll be standalone League On channels that will solve the problem in happy days and the whole status quo goes ahead. I think it will be so difficult that very, very, very radical thinking will come to the table quite quickly. If I was DAZN, I would say, I would have these conversations with all these leagues, and I would even do it with UEFA, and I would say, we can be a major player in saving European football. We've got one price. When I say we, we all know now that Saudi's in DAZN. My price is that the Saudi SPL clubs play in the Champions League. Can we do a deal? That's what I would bet on in the next rights cycle. Not how do we get back to the revenue number where the status quo state. I think that's the main delusion of our industry, thinking that national geo-blocked IP selling live rights exclusively, which has been the model for 30 years, is going to be the model for the next 3 years or 30. It's not going to happen. Completely different scenario now.
Completely agree. And 𝗍𝗁 would need to get nearly 7 million new subscribers this year to break even. And I don't see them getting 7 million new subscribers. Subscribers to do that either. So I completely agree with you. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Let me just look at the next one, and you describe it. Good question about Liv. And again, sorry to keep coming back to this, but the latest article, Landman talks all about this. If Saudi, who finances Liv, are $20 short of making their whole economy work with oil, it should be 80. It's currently at 60. And what does that mean for their sports strategy? What does it mean for PIF, for Surge, for Aramco, for the General Entertainment Authority, all of that kind of stuff? My belief, somewhat insider informed, is that they will focus. First thing they'll do is they'll cut back on all the mega projects, which have been a huge burn on money. And if they have to make choices between the sports properties they'll go for the ones that match their priorities of their Vision 30, which is participation in their domestic population, which means I'd be more bullish about Saudi SPL football than I would be about Liv. Going from 54, which, by the way, for those that don't know, Liv in Roman numerals is 54. So there's also a branding issue there. A lot of people don't know that. Going from 54 to 72 holes, I don't know. Does anybody know they're bringing back the cut? I don't know that. It's just thrown out there. The cut in golf. The 54 has got a new CEO. Sorry, 54 Liv. Liv has got a new CEO. He comes from the traditional world of sports media, of American sports media, which is the one of, you will get a big bid, won't you? You will get a big bid, won't you? I was asked an opinion on that, whether I was bullish on them getting a big bid from media companies, and you can imagine the reply. I go back to the start of the conversation. No, I don't think you will. I don't think you will. But they're obviously going in that direction. They're trying to change it to, I guess, offer broadcast as a competitor to the PGA as a rights package. I'm not sure. It's difficult to understand it. Liv will tell you that they are now about to start selling the franchises, the teams, because that is the model now in sport, isn't it? You do these kind of like global tours, like it's called the F1 model or the SailGP model. You do these global things in iconic locations. You've got teams involved, and the Hundred's another example of this. You then sell the teams, and the financial numbers for investors add up. Liv is going to try and sell those teams, but I bet there's nobody in this call that could name one team of Liv just now. So I don't know the answer to it. I just know that they're going to have to make some choices in Saudi, because they don't have the money they had when it was 80 or 90 or $100 a barrel of oil. Does that answer the question?
There's a great question in the chat about how you promote your sports and how F1 did it through Netflix. Do you think that could be a good strategy for soccer, for football in the future?
Well, again, this isn't my IP in saying this. Narratives become new, then they become tired, then they become dead like memes. That's how they go, yeah? So the idea of every sport has to develop its drive to survive strategy, that was the idea of the day 3-4 years ago. Everybody had to do it. You saw it in everything. Everybody did it. Golf, tennis, some clubs did it. Everybody did it. I think that's a dead meme. Most of these things have failed quite dramatically. The tennis one, Breakpoint, was an unmitigated disaster. What's the golf one called? Tee Up or something like that. I can't remember. Didn't do very well. So what the interesting question is, Valentino, is this one. Drive to Survive has been a great product for Netflix, a great product. Did they buy the F1 rights in America? Why do you think they didn't buy them?
I don't
They've
know.
already got the audience. Why would you pay for rights where you've already got that audience? This is the thing that sport doesn't understand. If a broadcaster or a sponsor has already captured your audience, they ain't paying top dollar for your rights to do a week by week storytelling of that league. They may say, I've got Drive to Survive. If you give me the Monte Carlo Grand Prix and you give me Monza and you give me Miami, I'll take those three, and that goes quite nicely with Drive to Survive. But no, you got to sell the whole thing. You see where I'm going with all this kind of stuff? It really is the old package no longer is what these bidders want. They want a completely different thing, and that's our big challenge.
Yeah, Sophie, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Roger. My name is Sophie. Thank you for taking the time tonight to have this discussion with us. I'm really enjoying it. I know we're talking a lot about the present and the future, but I'd like to go back to your time when you founded the SPL. And
I didn't found it. They hired me as the first CEO. It was already there.
Okay. So when you were in this phase of, helping it,
starting it up.
Basically starting up, how did you manage the tension between protecting the league's collective brand, but also the individual ambitions of clubs like Celtic and Rangers?
Well, that's a great question. If I had thought of that question, I would never have taken the job, because ultimately that's what killed me. We came up, we had 12 teams. We came up with a plan which is easily personified in what was called SPL Television, the thing I described before, where 10 clubs were very happy with that because they benefited from a stronger brand of Scottish football, what was called SPL, Scottish Premier League. Celtic and Rangers had personal agendas. They strongly believed at that time that they would get into the English Premier League. They had been told by many clubs that they would. They got hubris always gets you, Sophie. You're still a young person. That's the one thing I would say to you. Hubris always gets you. They thought they were going to get into England. The EPL had a formal vote, and the vote was 19-0 against Celtic and Rangers joining. One club strategically went to the bathroom at the time of the vote so that they could abstain. So what I'm saying there is that you've hit on absolutely the hardest thing in sport. As a league in Europe, slightly different in America, slightly different because a commissioner is a real commissioner. You've got closed leagues, so your shareholder base is fixed every day. In Europe, you have got promotion and relegation, so you don't even know if the person you're speaking to now is going to be there in 6 months. So that is very, very difficult. And in the main, whichever way they say it, we love the EPL brand, we love Serie A brand, they don't care. Your role as a league CEO is to do the central deals that they can't do by definition because they've given the rights to the centre. The central deals are, let's make it simple, title sponsorship and the major broadcast deals. They want you to maximise that and pay that money to them, and then for the rest of the time, get out their way. And anybody that's serious about building a brand, building a fan base, knowing the fans of a league in the way I talked about before, and you try and do these things, the big clubs will just say, get out my way. That's not your role. I don't want you looking into the fan base of Real Madrid. That's not your role. Yeah, but unless I do that, I can't sell a really great sponsorship of the league to Samsung. I can't do it because I don't have. It's not your role. We'll do that. I had situations, Sophie, where I was speaking to sponsors, had a deal on the table, took it into the boardroom of the SPL where clubs sat on, and the next thing I find out is that they've done the deal with one of the two big clubs. I mean, talk about that as ancient history. The last thing I want to sound is be bitter on that. but because your question is a very good one. How do you do that? And the answer is you can't. And that's why I always believe that some way, at some point, if you're serious about running a business in sport, you have to eliminate the risk of relegation. Because if you can't, then they will never accept a back-ended deal. Think about it. You know, like, are we going to do a deal where we're going to take a stake in Perform or Stat Sport, and we're going to be an equity player? And this club's thinking, well, more often than not, I'm not in this league because I've been relegated. Where does my equity sit? You know, because all these things I never thought through. So the fundamental flaw, in my opinion, on European sport is promotion and relegation. Then everybody says, but you got to reward achievement. You've got to let people get to where they want to. All these wonderful stories of a Bournemouth, of a Brighton, whatever, you know. Sorry, you don't get everything you want in life. Sometimes you have to go for the least bad option. And for me, the least bad option is closed leagues.
Interesting. Okay. And just to jump back quickly to the SPL TV, which you just briefly mentioned, do you think it could have succeeded under different circumstances?
It would have succeeded. It would have succeeded then, for a very simple reason. There are enough Celtic and Rangers fans in Scotland that are so crazy that their whole life revolves around watching their team in
I'm
the
aware.
weekend. But where is
My
it
family's
you work,
like that.
where is it you work, Sophie?
No, my family is like from Glasgow, so we talk about Rangers basically every week. So that's why I'm asking about the SPL TV.
And you're still a student?
Well, I used to study in Aberdeen, and now I'm studying at HEC.
Perfect. Okay. So when you've got that level of loyalty, you probably can think, well, look, I can probably go for a higher price than this, and how many do I need? We came out, I can remember it really well. The numbers and the model said that we needed about 180,000 subscribers to get going from the start. The market research was saying we'd get more than that. And I think if you start doing proper storytelling, which is never done, you know, we had always sold our rights to Sky, and with all the will in the world, the Scottish football story on Sky UK is not a priority. They're never going to invest in the kind of stuff that we've been talking about recently, the Manning brothers watch-alongs, the backstories, they're never going to do that. So everybody talks about SPL TV or the French thing. Do the numbers add up? I always reply, what about the storytelling? What about the brand building? You're just forgetting all that stuff. You're just forgetting all that stuff. And I actually thought that was a bigger thing, to tell more of the non-Celtic and Rangers stories in Scottish football. And I tend to think, I know John is very kind to me but in saying all these things, but I tend to think that opportunity was missed 25 years ago, and they've never recovered, and they'll never will recover now. I'm sorry for them, you know, like I saw that and I left. But you know, Rangers, good luck with that.
Talk about it every Sunday. But do you think so? That's when you talk about the like financial basically difficulties they face. Do you mean in respect for like clubs like Dundee, Motherwell, or are you talking about different clubs?
I'm talking about, well, the Scottish football goes into three categories: Celtic and Rangers, the city clubs as they're known as, Hearts, Hibernian, Aberdeen, and Dundee, and then the long tail of what are really big community clubs, the ones that you're mentioning, like Motherwell. The smaller ones live because they get a share of the contract, the media contract that is built on Celtic and Rangers. So they're living above their means in general. They are a beneficiary of being in part of a music album that includes two hits called Celtic and Rangers. They could have a different model. They could tell different stories, but their whole existence since my time in the SPL has been, how do I avoid get relegated? Because then the drop off in media values just goes down there. So, you know, I'll tell you this story. We at the SPL, it wasn't my rule, I inherited it. that you couldn't play in our league unless your stadium was a certain quality, which was a good rule. I was there in, let's call it January, February, even March, at games, watching the results come in in the boardroom of clubs. And I saw my clubs really hoping that the winner of the below league didn't have a stadium, because that meant they would be saved. Yay, yeah. You know, like whoever it was, Ayr United are top of that other league. They don't have a stadium, we're safe. And I was just thinking to myself, really? Really? But everything that's in the book, everything I write on the podcast is all about the reality of sport. Everybody says it's super sexy and everything like that. It's got a million of these stories, conflicts of interest, things like that, Sophie.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you, Roger.
No problem. What else am I missed here? Somebody on Atletico Madrid, does anybody want to expand on that? What am I missing? I don't know if that person is still here.
Keith, if you're still here, we'll be glad. If not, Anu has a question.
Yeah. Roger, hi.
Hello, Keith. Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I mentioned just the one point I think you're missing about Atletico, because myself and partners at RMG Investments were the exclusive brokers on that deal. So we know a lot about it. But I think the thing you're missing there is Atletico bought 200 acres around the stadium and have really done a great job in diversifying revenue, bringing in things like a concert hall, bringing in things like a university, bringing in retail, bringing in a whole different mix of revenue streams. So that's why it's got a valuation that can be justified, because they've done a really good job on that. I think that's where a lot of the bigger clubs are going to try and go.
I get that, Keith. I mean, we've got this thing here in Como with this whole outside, non-football. May I ask, and feel free to not answer, with all those extra revenue streams, can you give me the multiples on revenue and on profits that make up 2.5 billion? What would that be in terms of revenues?
You're right. You're right. I can't give you those numbers. But put it this way, it's not as big a multiple as something like Chelsea or some of the other deals that have been done that are, I think, at very inflated values. This one is a much smaller multiple
of revenue.
Yeah.
If you go to profit and cash flow, I think it still looks horrendously expensive. But I take your point, Keith. People are buying football clubs for real estate plays, for all this kind of stuff here. And I can say, the glory story of Como 1907 here, isn't it great? Isn't it wonderful? They've dropped 350 million since those new owners come in. Yeah. So you can be fifth in Serie A and talk about this and that and the brand and the clothing line and everything like this. You've dropped 350 million. European soccer doesn't make money. It doesn't make money, whatever way you want to cut it. The reason it doesn't make money is because you're competing for talent without any wage caps. And if one person distorts that market by going crazy, you're all living in the business model of the lunatic. And that's why you've got people going for 150 million transfer. Anyway, that's a whole rant. I believe the answer is on the cost line more than the revenue line, and nobody wants to focus on that.
Yeah, the point I was making there about the technology. If you look at the perfect storm, and let's call it climate change instead of the perfect storm, you've probably seen there's loads of technology solutions coming out now about strengthening the ice, deflecting the sun, all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm aware of a few new technologies that are coming out that could create new revenue streams for clubs and get away from the old model that you've been talking about. So there is a chance, in my view, that new technologies will allow clubs to carry on in some way, but it'll be a completely different model, and technology will find a way forward.
Keith, for the last 10 years, I've been very active in sport tech and all kinds of widget makers, personalization of streaming, you name it. There's one problem with all these things. Clubs, at the end of the day, are only interested in the upfront check. So unless that technology is prepared to put a big number down and take the risk, club isn't going to take the risk and hope it gets on the back end. Because you know better than me, you've ran clubs. So whether the technology works or doesn't, unless you can put the big check down like Rupert Murdoch did and Sky and like certain sponsors do, it's not going to save it. I worked with a company called Zone 7 that was about injury prevention, and we were in at Liverpool and we reduced their injuries by 66%. And that is a big number when you look at a wage bill and time spent on a treatment table. We thought that would open up the whole market for everybody to accept that. The product was wonderful, proven, verifiable, beautiful case study at a top club. Nobody else, well, almost nobody else bought it. We're sorted. We've got that covered. Our medical guy thinks no problem. Sport doesn't do change, Keith. It just doesn't do it. And I've just got that cynical at this point. I'm not going to bang my head trying to convince somebody that a tech is going to change their world. All they think about is it makes me look bad for the last 20 years I was taking a salary out of this club, the tech. So they push back on it. I don't want to make anybody pessimistic on all of that, but that is my direct experience.
All right. Well, listen, we'll agree to differ, but it was really good to see you again and good to see you looking so well.
Thank you, Keith. I can't see you, but I've admired your career from afar. You've done great.
We maybe have time for one or more two questions.
What's this one here? UC3 and relevant. Whose question is that? Have we covered that, Valentino?
Not yet. I think maybe.
We can do that. We can do Sebastian's question if we have time, and then Roger, just to close off, I have a very small question. So if those three.
Oh, guys, your event. Tell me what you want to answer.
Go ahead, Anu. Go ahead.
Let's go with Sebastian's question because I think
Okay.
it's super interesting.
Which one is that?
The last one. And he says that could the perfect storm of market conditions actually serve as a catalyst for regulation, whether in Europe or elsewhere, and actually create more effective cost control, or are we just heading towards a storm that sort of no one can prevent?
Well, as I said before, I think storms provoke change, and sport needs to change. So I'm a tick on that. I'm an optimist on that. Maybe some real chop coming up, but hopefully that's a catalyst for us. In terms of regulation, I'm not a fan of regulators. We had a joke at the start. Regulators are political appointees, and they've got another agenda. Bottom line is, I don't think anything will change in European football until you get salary caps and closed leagues, and a European Super League that may or may not include England, but should include everybody else, including Scotland. Does that answer the question?
So, the last question I have, Roger, and thank you again so much for your time. Super
Well, my
insightful.
pleasure. It's been really great.
A million questions I can ask. We can stay here till dinner, but I think one question that perhaps helps us the most as a community is, within this storm, within the eye of it, in this industry, let's say you were in our place right now, perceiving it with the industry being as it is, still being myopic, but with so many opportunities, still being underpaid, but so many new horizons opening up. Is there a bit of advice? Is there an angle that you think people like us can feasibly take?
It's a great question, and I do have an answer. I do have an answer.
Yeah, feel free to take the floor and be as.
Right, and I've said this to a lot of kids that approach me and ask basically the same question. Follow the money. You know, if you want to go in, as most people do, and work in a startup that's got a lovely idea about tech or something that's going to change, you're going to be a consultant in sport and earn an hourly rate or things like that. You're going to grind really hard in a sector that is notorious for not paying people because they're arrogant and they think you're working for Celtic, you should be paying me. That's a thing, right? You do not have pricing power in sport. That's the way to put it. Where to make money in sport is to recognize one thing. Sport needs a whole lot of new capital. A whole lot of new, right across the board. Over here, you've got a whole lot of people with loads of capital looking for reasons to say yes to deploy it. If you can do what Keith was doing and get in the middle of that, whether you call it, the model would be the Tinder of the sports industry. You match up that capital with that need for capital, and you clip a coupon on the deals The deals are that big that you will make on one deal what you would make in 5 years of grind. That's just, the money's in the finance. The rest of it is really, really tough, very competitive, over capacity everywhere you look, in sport tech, in consultants, and whatever way you look at it, it's a hard sell with no pricing power. Good luck with that. Over here, you just need to get one deal with somebody that wants to commit 100 million because they want to buy a championship team in the English Football League because they think they can get into the Premiership. You get involved in that and you clip a 1% coupon, do the maths. You know, that's my advice to you. You're studying finance, you guys. Get good at it. Follow the flows of money and just ride the wave.
That's quite fair. Thank you so much, Roger, for a truly wonderful evening.
I hope
Thank you to
that
everyone.
worked for you guys. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of energy and I met some old mates. Thank you, folks.
Before we finish, guys, before we finish, for our socials,
your photo.
Maybe we wanted to do like a screenshot. So the really good people, all the people that is here, if you can open the camera and say hi to the
just for a second
to the screen, would be great. You'll find a.
Thank you so much.
That would be great, guys. Okay, let's do. Great, guys. Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.